Hello, everyone. My name is Shonda McGahee. I knew Dave because we met in medical school and during residency training. I think that Dave stayed at Georgetown for as long as he did for me. Like literally, he was there waiting for me to come. Um, I was talking to a friend of ours who knew Dave as well from DC, and she gave me the advice just speak from your heart because I'm not a very good public speaker. And I just, I didn't want I didn't want to prepare too much. So I'll just say a little prayer before I start. To whom it may concern, please allow my thoughts, words, and memories to be felt for those in pain and for those filled with love and for everyone in between. Amen. Dave was magnetic. The friend that I was talking to, Rose Burnhill, who couldn't be here today, we were a little family in DC. Me, Rose, Alyssa, Ken, Murphy, Jeff, we were a little family. And even though I was in school with Dave and I knew he was an MD, PhD, I couldn't tell you what he studied about. I couldn't tell you what he loved about medical school because those weren't the things that we talked about. We talked about life and love and meaning and friendship. And there was something about him that just made you want to be around him, just made you gravitate toward him because there was comfort there. There was there was so much comfort to be with him. And he was a part of my DC family. And he's the reason that I am in Massachusetts now. Uh, I graduated from medical school and I went into internal medicine. And Dave was like, "Oh my God, psychiatry, come to Boston. Oh, MGH McLean. Oh my God, it's so good." And I would come and visit him in Boston. Like, isn't this great? It's awesome. I mean, there are very few people from medical school that I kept in contact with, but Dave was one of them. And he was like, "This is how I know he stayed in Georgetown to make sure that he met me, to get me to Boston, and to be the position that I am today. He's the reason that I'm here." And we didn't talk about psychoanalytic studies or psychopharmacology or just the greatness of Mass General McLean, but like, this is your calling, Shonda. This is what you need. And because Dave thought that of me, I could think that of me. And magically, 2 years after being in a completely another state and completely another program, I ended up in Boston because of Dave. We've known each other for over 20 years. And it's been said, life gets in the way and we drift apart and come back together and drift apart and come back together. And meeting Nora was a time of drifting together again. And his illness was a time of drifting together again. And there was a time when when I say we, I mean my DC family, we all came to Boston. Rose and Jeff and Murphy and me. Some hadn't seen Dave in years. And we surrounded his bed because he's still a part of our family, that love family. And the reason that I'm standing here, one of the last conversations that I had with him was, I was like, I just never understood how you always pursued God so much, Dave. You always were like, God is in this and God is in that, and understanding all of these manifestations of God. And as he was trying to make his way down the stairs without falling because of his illness, and he knew that this illness was going to take his life, he could still say, God is everything. God is everything. Even in the midst of what I'm going through, God is still everything. And I take that with me. And I hope that you all could take that with you today as well. I love you, Dave. Thank you.
Kathy Sanders. So I really represent Dave as a trainee in psychiatry. So my time with Dave started when he was recruited to come to MGH McLean. And I've often joked or talked to residents through the years how much I remember each one's recruitment. And we at the MGH McLean review roughly 1,000 applications every year for 16 spots. And Dave got the cut for an interview. And it was on that interview that I experienced much of what you've all talked about, where I saw someone through the haze of my administrative, checklist of encountering who this person was and how did they fit into psychiatry. And there was no doubt about it. He had that great energy, but also an incredible empathy and an ability to bring his own story to show people the way out of pain and darkness and trap. And I was just in awe of Dave in that first encounter. And I knew without a doubt that he was a leader in the field. And I wanted him to be at MGH McLean. And of course, he must have wanted to too, because he came. And and I know there's a lot that goes on among residents training together, but I never saw Dave complain, whine, or wimp out about the incredible, incredible workload and tasks that are expected of you as a resident that you likely will never experience again in your professional life. And he did it extremely well. And I don't have great quotes from him, but I do know this. There was a chief residency program that we had, and he was a chief resident. And I would take the group down to Provincetown by the ocean in that realm, and we would have an overnight together, and we would do various exercises where people would break off into twos or break into small groups, and we would build our sense of who we are and what we contributed to leadership, particularly in the residency. And that year it was an odd number, and Dave and I paired up to do a one-to-one. And that presence that you've all talked about, that calm but solid, supportive, from that base to the heights of spiritual exploration, he was present to me And within a minute, I was in tears, talking about the very thing I was hoping everybody in their little dyads around the place that we were meeting at were also going through. Some kind of touch of the heart, some kind of opening to the burden that we wanted to shed as we moved into this phase of leadership together. And what a leader. He was always that, as we call it, quadruple threat. Not only was he a great academic, a great clinician, a great researcher, but he also was a great community developer wherever he was. That foursome he integrated in everything that he did that I could see professionally. And it has been an incredible honor to have known Dave. I also had my moment with him as he was dying. And there were not a lot of words exchanged because there was not a lot of sensicalness. But as I sat there quietly with him for a little bit of time, I realized that if I didn't try to understand the meaning of the words, I really was communicated with. And I understood exactly what he was trying to tell me. And I have treasured that in my heart. I told him about that experience crying with him as chief resident. And he, in his humility and his graciousness and forgiveness, just shrugged it off like, hey, what happens in Vegas remains in Vegas. So I'm going to end by quoting from another mentor of mine who has nothing to do with medicine. But she said, we kneel to honor those who have passed, and we get up to take care of each other and to really care for each other in the land of the living with the help of those living wherever they might be. Brian.
Hi, everyone. So Dave and I have been family friends since Logan was a little baby, so over a decade, and consider him one of my closest friends. And my story is going to start with a situation that many of you that are close enough to him are familiar with, being dibbied or getting dibbied or being in a situation where Dave tries to dibby something. Anyway, so we were on a vacation here in New Hampshire in the White Mountains, and we were on ATVs because it was something that we scheduled, and it was really awesome, like being out here in the mountains. Dave loved nature, as many of you know, and being on the ATV was really cool. Went through our hair. We're going way faster than we were supposed to. It was just awesome. But we get to this place, and there's a big sign on the wall that says four-wheelers, all-wheel vehicle, or off-road vehicles. And Dave's like, hey, let's go do that. I was like, I think that's for four-wheelers, not ATVs. He's like, no, that'll be fine. And for whatever reason, I was like, okay, sure. So we go down that path. 2 minutes later, we're in these giant ditches, barely making it through. My wheel gets stuck, my suspension breaks, and we're stuck. That was probably my biggest experience of being dibbied, but there were others, but I won't get into that. But the thing about it, in the moment, I was really upset and kind of steaming. I was like, "The hell, Dave!" But I took a walk because I was like, I don't want to have that energy in that moment. Took a little walk, and I went around the corner, and I saw the most colorful frog I've ever seen in my life. It was bright blue, red, green, definitely poisonous. I'm fairly certain. I didn't touch it or lick it. But it was like I never had seen that before, and I have never seen that since, except on TV on National Geographic. But I wouldn't have experienced that. And then I look up, and back in the trees, there's a giant moose looking at me. It looked 12 feet, but I don't think that's possible. I think it was probably like 7 feet tall. It was very thin. I think it was female, and it was just as scared of me as I was of it. We looked at each other for a second, and I was just in awe. And then she slowly moved on and went away. And you know, in that moment, I was still upset, but thinking back on it, I was like, I would have never experienced this without Dave. And there were so many situations like that with him. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to share that one. And then we both kind of went through bouts of depression. And so we kind of like helped each other in those moments. But one of the things that Dave did for me was he would send me poems and he would send me little gifts. And I wanted to read a poem to you because when I was thinking about today, this poem that he wrote to me back in 2020 when I was going through a really hard time really stood out in a lot of ways. So I just wanted to share it with you. It's called Complex PTSD. Sometimes I'm caught in a groove that runs deep in my brain, violently trembling and drowning in pain, in that trapped and helpless place into which I am drawn again and again. But now aware of the pain that I often think that comes from out there, slowly I learn that it's mostly the feelings that make me tumble and turn from something that happened a long time ago. And what's left broken in me needs tenderness. So I sand down the edges an inch at a time, what once seemed huge walls that kept me in line. I polish smooth the darkness to a luster and shine. In an opalescent reflection of the colors of the skies, as a new world shimmers with tears in my eyes, my body and mind finally at ease, now knowing the nature of this so-called disease. So, a couple things about that poem is really beautiful and it like touched me in that moment, but also just thinking back about what happened after that. With Dave, I felt like he knew more than he was supposed to, maybe, or he just knew more. And he just had this, um, I don't know, awareness of things that we just weren't aware of in many situations. And I found that fascinating and amazing. Um, and then I think there was a lot about myself that I didn't like as when I was growing up and that I didn't process and that I didn't figure out how to get through. And I think Dave really taught me to love those parts of myself, to really embrace them, to comfort them, and to just help me so much get through all those things and to turn those like things that I was ashamed of and afraid of into things that are beautiful. And I really am so thankful to him for that. And one other thought I wanted to share was after he passed, a couple months after actually, uh, you know, it was for all of us, it was very hard to get through the day sometimes. And he had a nickname for me. It was Bry. No one ever called me that. I don't think anyone ever did. No one else called me that. There are moments after he passed where I could hear a voice just calling my name and saying, Bry, it's going to be all right. And I just felt this deep sense of peace and just this warmth, you know, just throughout my body. And he, you know, he was just helping me in that moment. I feel like helping me get through his own passing, which is really silly, but I'm just really grateful for his part in my life, and I'll miss him. I'll miss you, Dave, and he's always going to be a part of me, and I'm never going to forget him. Thanks.
Tara.
So Dave and I are both talkers. So one of the things I remember when I visited him in the hospital after, or right on the skirts of his diagnosis, I said, Dave, I'm so sorry for all the times that I just maybe spoke out of turn with you. And he just kind of put his hand out and said, you're all right. You're all right. So that was very comforting because being Italians, you know, we both had that intensity in our friendship. But since his passing, one thing I've meditated on very deeply is how relationships have chapters. I met Dave in the chapter of his journey that was beginning his partnership with Nora, who is truly still the love of his soul forever. And he told me that in our phone calls after his diagnosis, when he was still in the hospital. We would have long conversations, which often ended with bedtime chanting for him. And one of the things he said was that he didn't want to leave because he worried what will happen for Nora and his beloved children. And yet he said, but it's going to be all right because I will be with the one of the universe. Our family friendship included being spiritual comrades, growing into parents together with Nora, a brotherhood between my husband, Aaron, and Dave, much like Brian and Dave. They would reach down with iron hands to pull each other up from dark moments of depression. And a lasting endurance of soul connection that even continues now in our family on a daily basis. Dave is with us. Although we know that Dave's presence was not silent, there was a humility, and he was a silent, humble, strong warrior who was brave in all adversity and equal in triumph with everyone who knew him. So I remember this friendship as it continues with Nora and her family as a friendship of milestones, which included the hours and the passing of his body into the one. On the evening of his passing, Dave was lucid as I read to him in a quiet moment, just the two of us. This passage encapsulates so much of the chapter of time in our family friendship then and for always. It comes from a passage in a book called Bliss Divine. So our yoga path together, this passage is written as it's an excerpt from a much longer passage by Swami Shivananda. Life is God in expression. Life is joy. Life is flooding of the bliss of the spirit. Life is a conscious stream. Life is vibrant in every atom. There is life in everything. There is no such thing as inanimate matter. Life is involved in a piece of stone. Matter is vibrant with life. This has been conclusively proved by modern scientists. Life is a voyage in the infinite ocean of time, where scenes are perpetually changing. Life is a journey from impurity to purity, from hatred to cosmic love, from death to immortality, from imperfection to perfection, from slavery to freedom, from diversity to unity, from ignorance to eternal wisdom, from pain to eternal bliss, from weakness to infinite strength. Life is a great opportunity provided by the Lord for his children to evolve unto himself. Life is service and sacrifice. Life is love. Life is relationship. Life is poetry, but not prose. Life is an art and imagination, but no science. Life is worship. We are here as passing pilgrims. Our destination is God. Our quest is for the lost inheritance, the forgotten heritage. The great central aim of life is that coming into a conscious realization of the oneness with God. Life has no meaning as a separate life. It has meaning only when it becomes full or the whole, when the individual soul joins with the supreme soul. Dave was a friend, a comrade, healer, and he's with us now. always.
This is from Anthony Zerker. He's not here.
No, my brother.
Yeah. This is Nora's brother. And this is the message he sent in. David was a good friend before he became family. And I am fortunate to have had him in my life as both. No one I have known in my years on earth could bring more of a sense of joy and wonder to the world around him than David. Being around him was adventurous, sometimes a bit too much of an adventure, perhaps. For example, anytime you were in the passenger seat when he was driving, but that was all part of the David experience. He was never boring. And the times he changed my perspective made me live a little more, made me think a little more, made me squeeze a few more drops out of life. These are the moments I will always cherish. I will always love him for being a good friend, and I will always love him for how he loved my sister, and I will miss him dearly. We have a few objects that were meaningful and poignant in David's life, and we are asking David's children and a few others to pass these along among you. Please take what you are given and hold it very briefly to remember him, and then pass it on to your neighbor. While we're doing this, you have been given a sheet with Dave's picture on it and some words, and that's the song that his family and close friends sang to him, I believe, on the last night. So since we have a break here, and then we'll actually take a break, I'd like you to join in singing. So I'm going to start it with Nora.
Stand tall by the water, have no fear or loneliness. Let our love cross you over. Let our love bid you well. Stand tall by the water, have no fear or loneliness. Let our love cross you over. Let our love bid you well. Stand tall by the water, have no fear or loneliness. Let our love cross you over. Let our love bid you well. Stand tall by the water, have no fear or loneliness. Let our love cross you over. Let our love bid you well. Stand tall by the water, have no fear or loneliness. Let our love cross you over. Let our love bid you well. Stand tall by the water. Have no fear or loneliness. Let our love cross you over. Let our love bid you well.
Many of you have memories, stories, snippets that you might wish to share. And because we've been a long time in the sun and we do have refreshments in the shade, we ask that you find someone to share with them while we're having our refreshments. And I'll bring the mic up there and you can even use it. So, yep. There is a book that we want you to sign, or that you're invited to sign on a table of memorabilia up in the house here. And we also have stones. They're here, right?
They're here.
Yeah, they're right here on my left, on over there on this side. And these are stones that Dave
All went through Dave's hands.
all went through Dave's hands. And so please take one or more. There's a lot of them. Thank you, Nora.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay.